This is Twit.
Walt Mossberg, who has, I asked Liz Gaines when she was on the other day, is Walt writing less? She said no. He didn't. Walt is not what you call, a blogger in the sense that he files several stories a day. He does think pieces. He does personal technology reviews. He wrote today, published an article about Apple. Why Apple is like a movie studio. He says, and this isn't a response, of course, to this kind of drumbeat that Apple better have a hit. Apple better had a hit. Has Apple lost its greatness? Is it, is it the haunted empire? Blah, blah, blah. He says the most useful way to think about Apple is to see it as a movie studio. Studios release blockbuster franchise movies every few years and then try to live off a series of sequels until the next big successful franchise. And then he's something about Spider-Man. And then he says, looked at in this way, your almost new iPhone 5S and iPad Air, they're mere sequels, iterations of Apple blockbusters that rocked the world when they first appeared. But you should not assume that because they are kind of, like Spider-Man 2, that they are the end of the line for Apple. He says sometimes, as with The Godfather Part 2, the sequel is considered to be better than the original. Sometimes, as in Godfather Part 3, it's not. Sequels can make more money, sometimes much, much more than the original. This has been true of Apple's follow-on iPods, iPhones, and iPads. But after a while, audience interest in sequel wanes, competitors come up with alluring new things, then you'd better have a whole new franchise because you cannot live forever on sequels. Jobs understood this well. By the way, Walt, we should mention, was fairly close to Steve at the end. It's one reason why he maintained a drumbeat of game changers over a dozen years from the iMac to the iPad that rocked his competitors and upended other industries as well. And that's why Apple's like a movie studio. Steve built it that way. And I guess given that Steve also ran a real movie studio, Pixar, that makes a lot of sense. Cook has done just enough. By the way, I just want to point out that Walt calls Steve Jobs Mr. Jobs. He calls Tim Cook Cook. Okay, I'm just saying. Cook has done just enough to keep his sequels appealing. I still believe that when you combine hardware, software, and the ecosystem, the iPod, iPhone, iPad, and MacBook Air remain best in class. Cook has had some dangerous moments that did him no favors. The awful quality of the initial Maps service. The more recent self-rebooting bug on iOS 7. Yeah. High quality and reliability can't be taken lightly. So he goes on. He says, sequel time's almost up. It's time for a new franchise. He does not weigh in on whether Apple will have another blockbuster, but he says now is the time. It may be that, the watch, the wearable. It may be mobile payments. It may be, he mentions, Apple TV. This one could be a real franchise. But if Apple settles for just something too much akin to its current TV product, it might just be a sequel. Sometime in the next 6 to 8 months, he concludes, I expect we'll see if Cook, that Cook fellow.
That guy won't go on walks with me.
Walt. They're both Mr. or they're neither. Anyway, we'll see if Cook is the kind of producer who grinds out too many sequels or the kind who brings forth an original Godfather or Spider-Man. Your thoughts?
It felt like a bit of a stretch. I mean, it was an entertaining read, but it's always Apple is not unique in the idea that when they have a successful product, they try to leverage people's like of that product and improving it. The first version of anything kind of stinks, and so you don't really cancel something after one iteration unless it's the Apple Hi-Fi, something that people don't like.
I think that's really an important point. That it isn't at all like the movie studio. That movie sequels are almost always worse than the original because you're making some, taking an idea and stretching it.
Back.
Say again?
Yeah. Empire Strikes Back, Godfather Part 2.
Yeah. Part 2, okay. Empire Strikes Back really better than the original Star Wars?
Sons of Lamps. Sorry.
Okay. There are a few exceptions that are notable.
We're turning this into a nerd movie.
But they're notable because they're exceptions, right? Matrix 2, Rocky 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
Boogaloo.
Electric Boogaloo. Okay, but in technology, sequels are almost always better because, just as you say, you have a chance to refine, improve, learn from the customer. So I would throw this, Walt Mossberg. I know Tim Cook.
Well, I don't.
You all know Tim Cook.
I don't know that it merits a Craig Ferguson style tear up the blue sheet and throw it behind your back, but I mean it's a good piece in that it's something that people really, for stupid reasons, have to be reminded of, that the fact that Apple has not blown your mind in 5 years or 4 years doesn't mean that they're resting on their laurels. If part of the success of producing something great is that you get to keep producing that great thing that everybody loves. And also, would you really love it if every 3 or 4 years Apple completely changed their desktop strategy so that everything you've learned, everything you've mastered over 3 or 4 years is now out the window? Or even worse, that now there's nobody you can actually call for help because nobody has more than 2 or 3 years worth of expertise in any Apple product?